Islam, Morris. Islam. We got another one today. You understand me? Yeah. Today, um, I want to go ahead and drop some information today about our holy and illustrious prophet. Okay. Um, Today we're gonna address all the misconception about Moorish Science Temple, Moorish Science, our holy and illustrious universal prophet, Noble Drew Ali, and we're gonna you know get into this study so we can clear up a lot of misconceptions that we have these people talking crazy on our prophet, like our prophet wasn't, you know what I mean, like our prophet wasn't who he was. You see what I'm saying? So we have to understand this stuff is not a joke. There has been a lot of, misconceptions about the Moorish and Divine, the National Movement, the MSTA. So we're going to clear up a lot of conceptions. Yeah. Yeah. All right, Morris. You know what I mean? You want to listen to, some more teachings. So let's get into it. All right. I am Noble Man, Menelik Allah Arahim Brown L Bay, and I'm here today to, get into this. I want to start it off with the holy prayer. Allah is the Father of the universe. Allah is the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my God, my salvation, and my protection by night and by day through His holy, illustrious, universal prophet, Noble Drew Ali. Ameen. Inshallah. Yes, Morris. Now, today I want to bring you some information about Noble Drew Ali and the University of California in Riverside. Okay, we're going to look at Noble Drew Ali and the Moorish Science Temple, a study in race, gender, and Moorish American religion, 1913 to 1930. A dissertation submitted in partial satisfaction of the requirements for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy, okay, in history by Stephanie Ann Wims. Now, Stephanie Ann Wims put this documentation together with so-called other scholars, okay, that did a lot of indoctrinating within the language of their writing and the context of their writing, because we have to put in concept, or we're going to have to put in a perspective of, the real information, and then we're going to pick through the folly, and we're going to, extract the real truth, because truth is art, dear Moors. So, you know, within the lessons, we're finna go ahead and get off into this. So, Now, we're going to go straight off into, hold up, the dissertation of Stephanie Ann Williams is approved. Committee chairpersons, University of California, Riverside. Acknowledgement, this dissertation was made possible by the generous support of the VP Franklin Emory University Manuscripts, Archives, and Rare Books Libraries, and the University of California Center for New Racial Studies. Now, we're going to go into, the Darwin theory with the anthropological um, science fiction of race, because there's no races like that. It's only man and mankind. Okay, that is the human race. So when you get into ideology and the methodology, you see what I'm saying, that are all lies, okay, that was propagated within a paradigm. So you have to extract truths, okay, from the aboriginal people, the original people, and then you have to make up a methodology for the modern day people, okay? Because we are what our ancestors are without contradiction, okay? So, also many professors and graduate students, colleagues who constantly provided me with necessary insights into the work. Now we're gonna just get off into that. They giving, acknowledgement, they give their love, their support, and such. Now, the abstract of the dissertation, Noble Duality in the Moorish Science Temple, a study in race, gender, and Moorish American religion, 1913 through 1930. Stephen Ann Williams, Doctor of Philosophy, Graduate Program in History, University of California, Riverside, August 2014. Dr. V.P. Franklin, um, Chairperson, Noble Drew Ali, and the Moorish Science Temple, a study of race, gender, and Moorish American religion, 1913. 1930 examines the historical roots of the 20th century proto-Islamic phenomenon, arguing that the group's seemingly quirky identity formation was not random and, in fact, is supported by a number of historical contingencies that, when explored, reveal Moorish science as a sophisticated response to a violent racial caste system in American society. So let's talk about the caste system in American society. The first caste system, okay, the first caste system was created by the Moors, okay, because we dealt in empires, all right, and then we dealt in territories. Okay. So when we had other foreigners in the land, they had to be initiated to come into the land. Okay. So the it was by the ruling class. White means purity, white means landlord. So white was the status, not the pigmentation. Okay. So we're gonna clarify that. White is the status, not the pigmentation, not the carbon that's in your skin. Okay. Okay. Now, now, Islamic phenomenon arguing that the group's seemingly quirky identity formation was not random and in fact supported by a number of historical contingencies that, when explored, reveal more science as a sophisticated response to a violent racial caste system in American society. Okay. Now we already talked about the caste system. Now, through the use of a number of newly unearthed historical documents, photographs, newspapers, and scholarly secondary material, this dissertation presents a portrait of the development of more science that contends with previous analysis of the group as marginal and explains that theology as a hodgepodge of esoteric religious formations randomly thrown together. Instead, it shows the very deliberate con- amalgamation of seemingly desperate beliefs as something well intentioned and fashioned according to the cultural material available to Noble Drew Ali in early 20th century America. See, they want to mix and scratch. What the prophet did was he brought the signs and symbols of masonry because that was the practice of the Moors and that was the practice of Moorish science. That's all the contemporary signs that was in ancient Kemet and in Egypt, okay, in Atlantis, okay, that the Moors was familiar with and it was using it on a daily basis. That's how we was able to, map the world, map the cosmos, map the universe, and then map the lands. So that's why astrology. That's why astrology is one of our main contemporaries. So when these people have to look at certain things to understand what the whole paradigm and what the prophet was doing. He was emerging everything that belonged to the Moors, because that's why you're a Moorish. That means you're what's pertaining to Moors. Okay, he was merging everything that belongs to the Moors that was usurped from the Moors, that was taken from the Moors, because they didn't want to acknowledge the mothers and fathers of civilization from giving them the wisdom and knowledge to run government and to run a nation. They didn't want to acknowledge that. Okay, they cooped that, and they are foreigners in a Moorish land that have now put labels and brands on Moors. That's why they use the terms Negroes, African Americans, Latinos, etc., Indians, etc. Those are all brands. It's not describing the premature issues. No, they're not. Okay, it's the sanguinis of the bloodline. It's the blood that describes the being. Okay, so it shows that there was a larger web of cultural connectivity available to the Americas during this early period that allowed for a greater rate of synchronism, exchange, and fluidity than has previously been discussed. It takes into about the influence Marcus Mozart Garvey and the universal so-called Negro Improvement Association had on more science, the impact of Freemasonry, and which Freemasonry is more science. We're going to Freemasonry. Okay. First of all, we're not Freemasons. We are Masons. We are the original Aboriginal, autochthonous, indigenous people who had these truths before any modern European pale skinned nation. Okay. Now, in the success and spread of more science and the role of women within the early temple. So, women, Moabites, were the foundation of the temple. Okay. All right. Now, we got to understand. We got to understand what's really going on as far as the lessons and as far as how everything has been told in history. Because if you let your enemies tell your history, they're not going to give you the right history. They're going to put what they want to do. They're going to misconfuse and construe the history. Okay, that's why any foreigner, European, okay, and they can't even tell me their nationality, gonna come and try to question them more about where they from and this, that, and the third. When we got history of they came on droves on boats. These people, so-called Polish people, Irish people, Danish people, English. Well, they didn't. It's not even no English nationality. Okay, put that to the side because we already hold the Bunker Hill flag. So there's they can forget that. Okay, so we're gonna get into in the 1920s and 1930s, the Moorish Science Temple of America, the MSTA, under the leadership of Noble Drew Ali, our illustrious holy prophet. Okay, now Noble Drew Ali popularized a unique version of Islam among Moorish Americans. in the so-called United States, which is a corporation that's on paper. Okay, because it's really the United States of America, which Morocco recognized, right, which Morocco recognized, okay, before 1956. So when these people start talking this stuff about Morocco is over there, no, Morocco was over here, just like the Barbary states was over here. Okay, Al Andalusia was over here. Okay, when you do the real research and the real studies, you understand that the Europeans changed history after World War I, going into World War II. Okay, and they was the ones that was in bondage. Okay, so we're gonna have to put a stop to all this. This white supremacy stuff. No, they're not white people. They are modern Europeans that are pale and lacking melanin, lacking carbon. That's why they are immune in the way they are. Okay, and they are jealous-hearted people because they have been indoctrinated with what? Scientists that has been evil. Okay, and their agenda is to use the people and make the people go against each other because of a false doctrine. Okay, that's why the modern European has to be taught just as well as the Negro-minded Moors that's out here. Okay, so if anybody want to talk crazy about nationality, anybody want to talk crazy, because I'm protected up under the Constitution with my nationality in the United Nations, which is fraud, recognize it, because they already know what they was doing in conspiracy of a new world order agenda. Okay, you're not the Moors. You can't be like the Moors. You can't not be like us. We are the ancestors. That's your connection with man, Moors. Then you have mankind, modern European, pale skinned nations. Okay? So when these people try to come out here and spew all this, what I say, it's rhetoric. Okay? It's not it's not denoted into nothing. No factual, no anthropological studies, no nothing, because they all lies. Okay? It's a methodology in a national security to keep secrets. So in order for them to keep propagating lies. Okay? Now, the leadership of Noble Drew Ali popularized a unique version of Islam among Moorish Americans. Right? Historians and social scientists have noted the importance of the movement in the development of Islam in Moorish American communities. Anthropologists Arthur Huff Fawcett acknowledged that the Moors, Muslims, are directly descended from the Moorish Science Temple, the tenuous thread woven by Noble Drew Ali in long ago tiny missions in Detroit, Chicago, and Newark has penetrated the labyrinth political maze all the way to the Moors Panthers. Okay? Moorish science, therefore, has been an important element in the development of Moorish American Islam in the 20th and 21st centuries. Historian Amina Beverly McLeod acknowledged that Islamic belief in the Moorish community focused on central Quranic concepts such as justice, a purposeful creation of man, freedom of will, and humankind as the generator of personal action, both good and bad. Historians Yvonne Y. Haddad and Jane Eidelman Smith suggest that Noble Drew Ali was perhaps the first Moorish American Islamic sectarian leader to invoke basic Islamic symbols to unite Americans of Moorish descent. He understood that in order for a people to have any sense of its own worth, it was necessary for it to have an identity, a name, a land. Historians of religion, Richard Brent Turner, argued that more science Temple of America was the first mass religious movement in the history of Islam in America. Okay? Because they argued that because they indoctrinated the people to be Christians. Okay? All right? Now, before we even relinquished these people, it was Islam in Morocco over here that later became America. Okay? Now, that's what they're not telling you. That's what they don't want to give you. Because when you look at the dollar bill, number $1 bill, there's the pyramid and it's the what? Eagle on it. When the Moors was rocking, it was just the pyramid and the eagle together. Now, when you separated the nations, okay, from 1776 to 1865, they relinquished slavery. You see what I'm saying? Now we had to forcefully, through the Naturalization Act, give these people a nationality. They was made to get a nationality. Okay? So, the Moorish Science Temple of America was the first mass religious movement in history of Islam, right? The significance of this group as the progenitor of Islam in America, which is true. Before the Nation of Islam, okay, before Wally Ford, right? Because he was Wally Ford L, up under the prophet. All these frauds were up under the prophet. So was Elijah Poole Bey before he turns himself into Elijah Muhammad. But anyway, let's get back into this. Religious context generally, the Moorish American context specifically, has been acknowledged by many historians. Now, Michael Gormaz is a hater, okay, and he's ain't nothing but an agent, and he declared Noble Jubilee is necessary, the bridge over which the Muslims' legacies of the 18th and 19th centuries crossed over into the Muslim communities, right? No, no, because we bypass. There were Moors. Muhammadan was a Moor. He was not no pale Arab. Okay, so we're gonna get the context right. All right, all the prophets were Moors. Every last one of them were Moors. There were no pale prophets. Okay, now according, right, centuries cross over the Muslim communities of the 20th and 21st centuries. According to the Nation of Islam, right, NOI history and theology, Wali Ford Muhammad was the founder of the movement beginning in Detroit in 1930 after the prophet, right? Ford Muhammad converted many Moorish Americans to the nation, right? Because it was a big schism. All right, after the prophet demise, it was a big schism. Now everybody was choosing what sides they were taking. You had um yeah, you had Elijah Muhammad and Wally Ford L, betrayed the prophet and do a deal with J. Edgar Hoover, and then in 1930 they went from Moorish Science Temple of America to the Nation of Islam. Wow. What the damn traitors. Traitors. Okay? And was the teacher of the NOI leader, Elijah Muhammad, and discussing the relationship between NOI and the MSTA, Gomez explained there remained sharp disagreement over the precise nature of the relationship between Moorish science and Fard Muhammad. If in fact any existed, these disagreements are important as they go to questions of authenticity and claims of divine inspiration, but rather that attempt their resolution, it would more profitable to simply echo at observations shared by all. Fard Muhammad was a principal beneficiary of a theoretical framework and quality of discourse created by Noble Drew Ali. So he already was up under Noble Drew Ali. He knew all the tenets, he knew all the lessons, he was studious, and then he betrayed the prophet. So if all you dirty Moors that's out here still subscribing to the Nation of Islam and y'all don't got the real history, well, the Moors is going to give you the real history. Because they were Moors. They wore fezzes and all that. And then they couldn't be Moors no more, so they had to be the black Asiatic. Okay? You know how dumb that sound? You know how oxymoron that is? Black Asiatic. That's the sellout. Now, but rather than attempt their resolution, it would more profitable to simply echo on observations shared by all. Fard Muhammad, what was a principal beneficiary of theoretical framework and quality of discourse created by Noble Drew Ali. Now, they're going to try to say Noble Drew Ali created discourse. No, they created the discourse. That's why Gomez is the hater. That's why this confuses Moors. Okay, because you have these scholars that are paid, that are pushing a narrative and pushing propaganda and pushing an agenda. Okay, but we're going to correct that folly today. Now, Nation of Islam. Nevertheless, it is clear that Noble Drew Ali set the stage for the introduction of Islam into Moorish American religious formations in the 20th century, but not just formations of religious. He brought civics. He brought nationality. That was the main course. Nationality. Okay? It never was a scam. You know what was the scam? These modern Europeans that was claiming to be white. That was a scam because they was the Slavics. They didn't have no names. They didn't have nothing. The Moors was the one who taught them, showed them how to bathe, showed them how to live. Really. So if anything was fraud, it was the whole FBI and CIA and the prefaces of United States Corporation is fraudulent. Pro no op. That's what it is. So we're going to get back into this literature on the Moorish Science Temple of America, MSTA. The scholarly literature of the Moorish Science Temple has spanned a 60-year period and falls into three main trends: early anthropological studies, Islamocentric analysis, and the cultural intellectual approaches. These studies have contributed greatly to our understanding of Moorish science. However, a thorough examination of the literature reveals remaining gaps in our knowledge and raises new questions requiring additional analysis. The touchstone for scholarship of the Moorish Science Temple has been Arthur Huff-Fawcett anthropological study in the so-called black gods of the metropolitan Negro, right? So-called Negro. They keep still using these brands. Okay? A Negro was the modern European. That's what they were. They were the modern Negro, the triaglite monkey. That's what they are. Okay, and then they swapped places, and then they traded out with the man. Okay, and then they put mankind, like mankind is a supreme being or something like that, but it's not, because they are mankind and we are man. Period. Okay. Now, when we're dealing in anything, okay, that has to do with these people, they are playing a narrative. They are not the heirs here. They are not real Americans. Okay, they are modern Europeans. All right, that was forced to have a nationality. Okay, and that's what they're gonna have to go back to, their nationality and their national principles. That's what they're gonna have to go back to. It's none of this white status crap talking about they are white beings or white race. That's lies. Okay, automatically it's a lie. And I don't give a damn who they are. I don't care who they are. You a liar. Now, we're going to get up into this. Now, the chapter on more science was belief, 11 pages in length, and presented several comments and excerpts from oral interviews with MSTA members. Interviews were conducted with members, and newspaper accounts and reports from the works projects administrations, WPA, were used. Fawcett noted his indebtedness to the historian Anna Bontemps, who allowed Fawcett across to his files at the WPA Moorish History Division in Chicago, where an historical study of this cult has been made. Fawcett's work detailed the origins of the Moorish Science Temple, the clandestine nature. So it wasn't clandestine. See, this is another. This is another one, because all masonry is clandestine. It's a cult. It's hidden. Okay, so what the prophet did, he came back to us and he said, like, all this masonry that the modern Europeans are using against thee is belong to you. So you should not be giving up your sovereignty to these people. No, you should not be taking oaths to these foreigners. No, they're supposed to be taking oaths to you because you was the one who established them, who established their nationhood, who established their principles. You are the ones who fostered them. So if they, that's why they have an adoption to the Constitution, because they adopted our principles and our morals for them to be upright, for them to have a nation, for them to be a free Mason. Okay? Because we are the original Aboriginals Masons. We are the first Masons. So that's why I'm finna debunk all the misconceptions. Okay? Now, the organization membership, qualification, finance, the sacred texts, beliefs, rituals, and practices. In addition, Fawcett also addressed some of the members' religious motivations, the conversions to Moorish science, right? The testimonies included in Moorish gods of metropolises emphasize the members' disappointment with Christianity, which was one of the main reasons given for what? Their conversion. A Moorish American only identifies as HR, declared that he lost his faith in Christianity at a young age because he already knew it was indoctrination. J. Edgar Hoover used Christianity to indoctrinate the people. That's why he battled with the churches too, to control and take over them. FBI, CIA, mass, okay, terrorize Moorish Americans, okay, in their own land, right? With the apparatus, with the power of the apparatus. Don't forget that, because we are occupied, okay? We are POWs in our own land. Now, his faith in Christianity at a young age, and he didn't like it, and he hated it. To see his mother get happy in church, he loathed the hypocrisy of the Christians. He joined the Muslims, HR, right? Alluded to the frenzy of getting the spirit that occurred in Moorish American religious practices, serving services at Pentecostals and holiness churches. HR was raised in the Christian tradition, but discarded it upon joining the MSTA. In the case of YX, right, XYZ, his conversion experience occurred while studying for the Christian ministry. He was unable to reconcile Christian faith with the unchristian practices he witnessed regularly, so he became a Muslim. Fawcett also included the testimony of a woman who has been floundering in her Christian belief and became mentally distressed by the paradoxes of American Christian practice, especially when so-called Negroes were involved. See, this is what we're talking about. This is the hypocrisy of these modern Europeans, right? Okay. Now, she joins the Moorish Science Temple. These accounts of convergence experiences reveal that the journey to the Moorish Science resulted from the disenchantment with Christian beliefs and institutions because they took Christianity and they perversed it. Okay, now they supposed to have a Judeo-Christian um like the Moors had set up for them, right? But now they destroyed that because now they brought all homosexual activities, right, Moors? Sexual activities, homosexual activities, and all this heatheness that they brought upon themselves. Now, let me get this right because I got to get it right. Okay, they brought all this stuff upon themselves. Now, we got to understand in the context. Now, Anna Bontemps and Jack Conroy first published in 1945 their findings on the Moorish Science Temple, and They Seek a City later republished as Any Place But Here. 1966, however, they offer only a few paragraphs on MSTA. In this account, the authors pointed out the connections between Noble Drew Ali and Marcus Garvey as contemporaries, according to Bontemps and Conroy. Garveyism was an important component in explaining the success of Moorish science, but their brief account offered few details. Bontemps and Conroy highlighted the synchronism present in the sacred text. More of the Moorish Science Temple, insisting that Noble Drew Ali had written and published his Circle 7 Quran, a slim pamphlet consisting of a curious mixture of the Muhammadan holy book of the same name, right? The Christian Bible, the words of Marcus Garvey, and the anecdotes of the life of Yahshua, the whole bond together with the prophet's own pronouncements and interpretations. The appeal of Moorish science was its unique theology tailored to the Moorish American experience. The blending of Christianity and Masonic imagery and practices were elements that had particular resonance with working class of Moorish Americans in the earlier 20th century. Noble Drew Ali wrote Bontemps and Conroy possessed an eloquent tongue, a persuasive manner, and a native shrewdness that enabled him to sway the poor and unlettered people who listened to him. Now, he said to sway the poor. These people are not poor. Moors are not poor. Moors are plain rich. Now, we are suffering for mental slavery that we think that we are poor and we think that we are not who we are because of these indoctrinations of the school system, okay, and the heavy scientifical inducement within the propaganda on the television, on the news, on the radio every day that you're going to see that you want to try to call me a Negro. No, I'm a Moor. And all the people who look like me are Moors. Now, when these damn devils keep trying to come on your fade and keep trying to tell you that you are a black person, that is an English legacy that is connected to your straw man, which is in all caps, okay? Which is the system is already promulgated on, okay? I'm not listening to that bull crap because I am a free national, period. Now let's get back into the information, okay? Now the Greater Migration extended from 1900 to 1930 is significant in explaining the sources of Moorish science in Chicago, Newark, Detroit, Philadelphia, and other northern cities where Moorish Americans of different backgrounds arrived and created new syncretic cultural practices and religions. Bontemps and Conroy argue that the migratory impulse should be viewed as personal experience and that the story of internal migration of Moors in the United States of America has perhaps as many threads as the story of the nation's westward expansion. Historian Richard Brent Turner declared, what is especially significant for us is that the great migration of southern Moors to the northern and midwestern industrial cities from 1915 to 1930 resulted in the new religious, political, economic, social, and psychological needs in the Moorish American communities, right? And thereby encourage the growth of new urban religious and political movements. It is against the background of a dynamic movement that we are able to account for the significant religious, social, and political changes in Moorish American communities. What? The limited historical research on the Moorish Science Temple before 1970 contribute to its what? Liminal place in the scholarship on Moorish American religions and social history. So we already know in the concept of having civics as the foundation of the Moorish Science Temple and the religious foundation is a theocratic government that was set up by our noble prophet. Okay, now in the context, how these people has flipped the temples into a 501c religious corporation is treasonous, and that's all by design by the FBI and CIA and J. Edgar Hoover okay, and Elijah Muhammad and Wallace Ford all conspired to keep the Moors in a Negro state, okay? And it's all by design. Everybody have to be into this to for order it to work. They had to cool it. They had to put masons, okay, inside those temples, and they had to only do certain things that's not going to be any type of political movement anymore. They wanted to die it down, put their foot on his neck, literally. Now, now we got the reviewed interest in the Moorish Science Temple in the 1970s was fueled by Moorish study and religious studies movements in the academy, and scholars began to focus on Islam in North America. Edward E. Curtis pointed to the Islamic turn in religious studies and research, such as Richard Brent Turner, Amina Beverly McLeod, Yvonne Y. Hadid, and Jane I. Smith and Michael A. Gomez contribute to the renovated, renovated focus on the Islamic elements in MSTA teachings and practices. One of the main debates in the Islamic centric research is whether the Moorish science should be considered an Islamic religious group, and if so, whether the movement represent the first Moorish American form of Islamic worship in the United States, which it doesn't. Okay, that's the whole thing. They're trying to mix and scratch like Moors are like the Muslims or something. We're not like them. Okay, we don't subscribe to 99 virgins in heaven and all that crap. No, and Muhammad already prophesied it was going to be a Moorish Messiah coming. All right, but they don't want to acknowledge that. Okay, they want to do everything on top of everything to disregard our prophet. Okay, so just like the Aquarian gospel, they want to say the prophet, you see what I'm saying, plagiarized that, when in actuality Aquarian gospel were written by the modern European. He plagiarized Moors, period. Anything, everything that's going on now from the knowledge has been brought in by the Moors. So if anybody plagiarizing anybody, it's the modern European nations is plagiarizing the Moors. So they should pay homage and give respect to just do Islam. Now, one of the main debates in the Ismocentric research is whether the Moorish science should be considered an Islamic religious group, and if so, whether the movie represented the first Moorish Americans, right, form of Islamic worship in the United States of America. One of the main sources of contention is that the sacred text of the Moorish science does not reflect the tenets associated with Orthodox Islam, because we don't know. It's Sufi Islam. Okay, Orthodox Islam and Sunni Islam and all the rest of that Islam ain't Islam. Okay, it is a religious practice that has been issued by the contemporaries of what these people want to have allow and control and manipulate their masses. Anyway, so we're gonna go into the sacred text. The circle 7 Quran had the number 7 in a circle on the cover. Historian Michael A. Gomez concluded that. So don't y'all want to know why the circle 7 was on the Quran? Because the prophet was intelligent. He was a genius, because the 7 represent the G, which in masonry, okay, is on the compass in the square. Okay, so the 7 replaces the G. Okay, and the compass is the square is replaced with the circle, because we already circumferenced that. We already did that. So we are bringing it back. Right now, the circle 7 Quran bears no relationship to the Quran, and of old, Noble Drew Ali complied his book from several non-Islamic sources, which is a lie. Okay, he did, because the Bible was written in Aramic, okay? And those contemporary reports goes right in with Islam, Christian and Islam. The same thing. That's why the Bible refers to Jesus just as well as the Quran. Now, the two conclusions equally disturbing from the view of orthodoxy flow from these observations. Either Noble Drew Ali was in fact quite ignorant. See, this is what they want to say. This is the folly. This is the folly. Tell me he was quite ignorant. No, the hell he wasn't. He was a prophet, and you niggas are slandering his name. Now, of the substance of the Quran, and therefore created the Quran out of the need for written revelation, giving his claim to head a Muslim community, right? And that was the real reason, okay? Or having some knowledge of the Quran. That he did have knowledge of the Quran. Noble Drew Ali made the determination that it required supplementation, either because it did sufficiently address the needs of Moorish Americans, his own need to establish his claim of prophethood, or both. But it wasn't his need because he was already a prophet. This is what they kick in the propaganda. He came here and he did his job. If he wanted to do anything else, we wouldn't have what we got now. See how you see how these people are propagandists? Now, anyway, we go back through the analysts of the Circle 7 Quran, right? Contents. Here go Gomez, the hater, highlighted the multiple and diverse intellectual and theological influence on Moorish science. Goldman emphasizes the Quran resonance with the needs of Moorish American, which helps to explain why Moorish science was attracted to some Moorish Americans in the urban northern during the early 20th century, which he goes back to, well, that's why it was, it's to Moors, and that's why, no, because in our DNA, right, we been here before. See what I'm saying? So if the prophet coming in the flesh, he's going to talk to us spiritually, and he's going to bring us back those certain things that we forgot about. And then we're going to embrace him because, we remember those things now once we get into the concepts and once we get into the studies. See what I'm saying? So the prophet was a genius. Now, moreover, he pointed to some Moorish Americans' desire to be associated with Islam and the Middle East. These identities signify an ancient and legitimate descent that contested contemporary claims that the person of Moorish American descent was adrift and without direction. Noble Drew Ali offered Moorish Americans a natural nationality. Now they're going to say corporate, but what is a corporate? Corporate is a corporation. You have to be nationals first. That's what the prophet said. You have to be nationals first before you join this organization. So how that was a corporate, how nationality is corporate? Huh? Now that's the trickery, Moors. That's why they want to keep Moors in confusion. Okay? That was the unearthly establishment in antiquity. So too was the shared religion. Moorish Americans, therefore Muslims, who could trace their heritage to Morocco and an even earlier Moabite origin. Religious scholar Peter Lamborn Wilson has argued that Noble Drew Ali's Islam had historical roots of several kinds. Now, he wasn't a hater, he told the truth. First, in various secret societies. Second, in certain serving groups of Islamic descended Moors in America. Religious historian Amina Beverly McLeod soberly remind us we may never know how Noble Drew Ali came to Islam because he's a prophet and he's divine. That's why. And he was sent by the great God of Allah. Now, there is no document story about Ali's introduction to Islam. Whatever the origin of his Islamic expression, Noble Drew Ali simply assertion that a person must have a nationality led many to his doors. Historian Susan Nance has argued, however, that Moorish science is most accurately described as a more spiritualistic style religion sleep in the philosophies of mysticism and Freemasonry, Nance believes that we must take Ali's use of the word Islam and other things Islamic as symbols, which he used not to direct his believers to scriptural Islam or to the beliefs and practices of Muslims in the United States or elsewhere, but rather as a sign of authenticity and secret wisdom of Moorish Americans had come to recognize in other contexts. So, what she's saying is that the prophet has brought something, okay, that is brought the elements to start religions. He brought everything that Moors used to start religions, okay, and now he added on because everybody else had brought folly and mixed and scratched the truth, and it was using it to control the people instead of to liberate the people. Now, in secret, Moorish Americans had come to recognize in other contexts already. One of these other contexts was the fraternal organizations of various Masonic orders prominent among Moorish American men. So that's why the prophet came to combat that, because he already knew the people was already in these Masonic organizations and it was being used and pimped by the modern Europeans. So that's why he came. He knew the history of masonry that belonged to the Moors because it was Moor science. He knew it already. Now, Noble Drew Ali apparently decided to fashion his religious movement and national movement and civics movement using the Masonic influences in Moorish American culture because that's our culture. Duh. Moorish American leader and author James Weldon Johnson, in the novel The Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man, described a character who was introduced into the Burgundies class through his induction into the Freemasonry of the race. With the attainment of the knowledge of more Freemasonry, Johnson was afforded a critical understanding of the more Masonic worldview. Historian Corey B. Walker suggested that as a result of his contact with the Moorish American Burgalese, Johnson character arrives at the realization that the group of colored so-called colored people who inhabited a cultural world of piano instruction and organized religion what possesses a degree of racial knowledge of which he was totally unaware. This secret world opened the door for a deeper understanding of the race and events taking place in the Jim Crow South. James Weldon Johnson was engaging in this demystifying the seemingly natural order of things because in that era of Jim Crowism, you put your fez on, you put your turban on, these people could not touch you. They could not tell you nothing. Now, many practices with Noble Drew Ali, Moorish science point to the strong Masonic influence. But our prophet came and he revealed all the secrets. He did it out in the open because he letting people know that Moorish science belonged to Moors. The masonry belonged to Moors. So we're going to do it out in the open. We're not clandestine. We're going to do it out in the open so everybody can see because it belonged to us. That's why he said, do not mark your fezzes, Moors. Keep them pure and clean, like your heart. In addition to the racial knowledge informed by more Freemasonry, a number of scholars have indicated that the fraternal organizations were a significant influence on the symbolism in uniforms worn by MSTA members. For example, the fez was worn by members of the ancient Egyptian Arabic nobles of the mystic shrine, also known as the Moor Shriners, a Masonic group established in the 1890s. The fez is worn by Moor Shriners typically identified which specific temple they were associated with and had an embroidered image of a sword above a crescent and star. That's it. Okay, they had a crescent, right, with the crescent, then the sword and the star. Now, when you see the Europeans, they got the Moabite with the with the scimitar over it, because that's subjugation of the Moorish nation. But they want to try to talk crazy to Moors. You can't talk crazy to Moors who study. Not at all. Study more. Islam, noble. Islam. We got swindle on here. We already know more. The land more is exactly. We already know. I got you more. We all over the globe. We already know more. So now that embroidered image of a sword above a crescent and star feathers worn by members of MSTA were typically red and did not have any embroidery on them, because the prophet said that Moors do not mark your feathers. You're not a part of no Masonic group. You are Masons, but you're not a part of no group. We're nation building. The temples is our lodge of government. Okay? That's why we have to listen to the prophet and go into the temples and put those old Moors to the back. Okay? Because they have cooped our temples, Moors. Okay? Now, MSCA also used the name noble, right? Now, Michael Gomez, the hater again, noted that noble was actually the title conferred upon members of both the ancient Egyptian Arabic order and the white Shriners. But they're not white. Stop it. They are modern European Shriners. Okay? We're gonna stop calling them white, because white is not a race. Period. Okay? Now, so also use, okay, and Michael Gomez noted that noble was actually the title conferred upon members of both. Okay, we already read that. Now, Noble Drew Ali's use of the designation in his name suggests a concise decision to foreground his Masonic credentials. No, 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 no. Not to put down his Masonic credentials. No, it's to show his nobility and character and birthrights and inheritance. That's what noble is standing for, not for no damn masonry. Okay? Now, as does the existence of the photographs in which he is shown wearing a Masonic apron and other associated paraphernalia, which is a lie. That's not the prophet. He was not in no Masonic organization. It's propaganda. That go Michael Gomez mixing and scratching again. Okay. Historian Corey B. Walker argues that Moorish American Freemasons established the space whereby we are able to integrate the performance of a montage of critical views on the political form, rhetoric, and substance of American democracy. See, this is we don't do democracy. We do republic. See, that's the trick again. They want to mix and scratch the truth with falsehood. We scimitar on falsehood. Okay. Now, Walker posed, right, a dynamic notion of Moorish American masonry as a consistent, evolving material and discursive formation that directly and indirectly engages the ever-changing nexus of political, social, and economic forces of American Republic culture. The influence of Freemasonry, right, which the Moors gave to their sons, the modern Europeans, right, because we are the original Masons on Moorish science, because Moorish science derived Masonry, okay, and the particularly noted in the addition of the El Orbe, because the El Orbe denotes to the First Nation clause, okay, the preamble of the Constitution, right, right. So, to members' names, independent scholar Saeed Al-Admin Issa pointed out, Noble Drew Ali accepted many customs and symbols from the Masonic Lodge. Certain parts of Noble Drew Ali uniform, as well as the names El and Bey, were taken from the Masons. Yeah, because they belong to the Moors, because Moors are Masons originally. Moors are the custodians of all the knowledge originally. Issa suggested that many of Ali's gestures and ritual movements were taken from Masonry because, like I said, more science is Masonry. And as Nan suggested, may have been used to garner respectably and legitimately for more science. The role of Masonry is also revealed in the syncretism found in the secret text, the Circle 7 Quran. See, Moors? See? See? See, Moors? Now, they give you the truth and then they want to try to mix and scratch the truth and mix it all up and try to give you something and just, here you go, eat it. No, we're not eating that. Nah, we like to separate our peas from our corn. And that's how we distinguish things around here. More science, right? Quran included various religious practices borrowed from other traditions, but it should be taken seriously as a sacred text. Its full title, The Holy Quran of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, 7, Know Yourself and Your Father God Allah, that you learn instead of hate. You learn that you will love to learn instead of hate. That you will love to learn instead of hate. Every man needs to worship under his own vine and fig tree, because within you being a Moorish American national, it's truth in all religions. That's why we are Muslims. We don't go with the Muslim concept because they already been taken by the modern European. Muslims study all religions because we brought all religions. Islam? Okay. The uniting of Asia clearly reveals the syncretism, right? Syncretism fundamental to Moorish science, that the deity was hyphenated, God Allah. Combining Christianity and Islam is a telling sign of the complexity of the religious belief in Moorish science. Noble Drew Ali and his movement were part of a longer theological and intellectual genealogy that included elements from Garveyism, Freemasonry, just Masonry, and New Thought, which is more science, and Rosicrucianism in Islam, because that's already in Masonry. They're mad at the prophet. They want to take these individual, right, Rosicrucianists, Masonic organizations and try to affiliate the prophet with them, but we are the founders of that. So yeah, you can affiliate it, but no, he brought it back so we can have something again and do it out in the open and not in no damn lodge in secret, because this is our land and we are the nobles here in our land and we have nationalities, period. And we are what? Have a birthright and inalienable rights here. The sacred text of the Moorish science is one of the few primary sources available directly from Noble Drew Ali and reveals a great deal about his theology. Now here we go with Michael Gomez, the hater. Declared Noble Drew Ali's ideas reflected the quintessential convergence of Islam, Islamism, and Masonry, New Thought, Rosicrucianism, and anti-cardinalism, right? Anti-cardinalism, in its critique of European imperialism and nationalism, land, and the rejection of modern European American racism. Although most scholars recognize the more science version of Islam far from orthodox, it is a matter of debate the degree to which it represents an organic link between 19th century Moorish Americans, right, and 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 Africans in Islamic communities, and those of the 20th and 21st centuries in an intriguing, right, interpretation of Ali's title. Michael Gomez, again hater, highlighted the use of the number 7 as representative of the Masonic beliefs. See, I already told you that before we even read it. So I already know that these people are full of crap. They want to mix and scratch and don't want to tell the truth. because they want to keep things the same way they are. But we're not going for that. Now, as well as a reference to the apocalyptic signs of the seven seals in the book of Revelation, Gomez emphasized the intertwining of the business of religion with a nationalist project, and concluded that the followers of more science were preoccupied with acquiring a corporate identity derived from an appropriate religion. See, that's all bullcrap, because it's not corporate, because a corporate is a corporation, United States, and they know they can't deal with the natural man, so they want to incorporate your nationality, which these more science temples has been doing the sellout. These Masons has been doing the sellout, putting a barcode on their nationality cards. That's all sellout. That's treason. In order to redefine itself in relation to, like, the so-called white and black politics here in America, in the United States, and highlighted is transnational association with Morocco, because Morocco, right? Morocco recognized the United States of America. That's why. And researchers have examined religious movements such as Rosicrucianism and New Thought that arrived on the American cultural scene. And more science was influenced by these various spiritual movements. In Edward Curtis' view, the best of this new scholarship utilized dynamic notions of both Moor and Muslim identities to depict the human agency and creativity of those pioneering Moorish Americans who called themselves Muslims in the 1920s. This type of syncretic approach indeed offers an approach to the theology, but does not address MSCA as a social institution made up of the people and networks that supported Ali and his leadership of the Moorish Science Temple. Curtis noted that a comprehensive cultural history of the MSCA has yet to be written, because they've been, like I said, lying. They've been telling lies, swapping things up, changing, talking about this is not a national movement. This is just a religious movement, which is all treason. And we got to give that to who, Morris? Who we got to give that to? The CIA and the FBI and the Masons, who tried to coup our movement. But no, 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 no. The prophet said, before this movement is tore up, I will tear you up. Islam? Now, although much remains to be done, Susan Nance has contributed to this approach and argued that for a time the Moors and their Prophet Ali did become publicly respectable by staging exciting but law-abiding displays of publicity that drew on whatever positive stereotypes of Morocco and Islam existed in Moors in America. Culture. She considered members of Moorish science as participated in American Oreo, Orientalism, which we are Asiatics. See what I'm saying? So it is Orientalism because we Asiatics, right? And constructing a social, acceptable interpretation of Oriental culture and religion, which they appreciated. Thus, more science was respective of larger cultural and religious phenomena occurring in the United States and America in the early 20th century. What? Now they're saying the clandestine nature of Moorish science has seriously attempts to uncover its history. Estimations of MSCA membership are somewhat near 30,000 during the mid 1920s, similar to other contemporary social and religious movements, such as the Islamic Ahmadiyya movement. As noted above, most studies of Moorish science focus on the use of or misuse of Islamic tenets in the movement. However, this discussion, this this assertion documents the Moorish American elements by examining Noble Drew Ali's personal background, the influence of Garveyism, the roles of Moorish American women, and the importance of Moors Freemasonry, which we know is Masonry. Now, in photography in the movement, chapter outlined the first chapter in the beginning origin stories of Noble Drew Ali, investigates the early narratives of Drew Ali's life, including his time in Newark, New Jersey. As proof, Drew was Egyptian adapt student. Okay, he was an adapt student. They always want to try to debunk what the prophet knew and what he learned. Now it tells you in here he was a Egyptian adapt. Okay, this includes new research on possibilities of Drew Ali's identity as Thomas Drew, which it is not no Timothy Drew, no, okay, rather than Timothy Drew, as has been suggested. Research on the Canaanite temple by Patrick D. Bowen suggests that a man by the name of Abdul Hamid Suleiman may have been more closely connected to the creation of Newark Group. These new insights into Ali's background suggest that his missing years may have included more activities than early scholars have recognized. This new information reveals a number of religious and social networks that Drew may have encountered during his years in Newark and thus helped him in forming the MSTA in Chicago several years later. The second chapter, One God, One Aim, One Destiny, Garveyism, and the formation of Moorish American Islam, investigate the role of Marcus Garvey and his Universal so-called Negro Improvement Association in creating a cultural space necessary for the advancement of Moorish science. Garvey played an instrumental role in shaping Moorish science as he served as the symbolic and fugitive John the Baptist of the Moorish movement. Bontemps and Conroy observed in They Seek a City in 1925 as Garvey paced up and down in his newly occupied cell in Atlanta. A small Moor wearing a flaming red fez similar to those worn by Turks appeared in empty lots and on street corners of Chicago's South Side to proclaim a start in a new doctrine. The relationship between Garveyism and Noble Drew Ali is thoroughly explored in this chapter because it is integral to understanding the success of Moorish science and attracting Moorish Americans to the new religion. Chapter 3, Woman in the Formation and Development of the Moorish Science Temple of America, utilized newspapers, accounts, photographs, and the Circle 7 Quran to assess the importance of women within the temples. From the available evidence, it is clear that women played a central role. For example, a December 1928 article in the Chicago Defender described Miss Pearl Ali, Noble Drew Ali's wife, as significant to cultivating participation of the youth. The headline read, Miss Drew Ali organizes young Moorish people. The article identified Miss Pearl Ali as MSTA's national secretary and treasurer and described her activities with the young people in the movement. The purpose of the youth group was to create interest in the educational pursuits and to awaken and cultivate an appreciation for the arts through a greater attendance at the literary and trade schools. The article also mentioned Juanita Richardson Bay, who was a graduate of Wendell Phillips High School and the city editor of the Moorish Guide. The MSTA main publication, the documentation unearthed suggestions that women played a critical role in shaping the early movement. Chapter 4, Symbolism and Science, Moorish American Masonry and Photography in Moorish Science Temple of America examines the use of photography, science, and masonry in the Moorish science movement. It analyzes a number of photographs publicized by the MSTA leaders and suggests that the images were used to offer a number of recognizable visual cues from the contemporary culture to help create a unique perspective on the movement. These images were representative of a counter archive circulated at the time to challenge the ideas of racial scientists who posted views about the innate racial inferiority of Moorish American descended peoples. The photographs produced and disseminated by Moorish Science insisted that a Moorish heritage was something to be proud of and worthy of celebration because the prophet was keen and right and knew the history of the Moors and he knew the real about Moors. And he knew that these modern Europeans were liars. So he already did something to save the people out of their disparity. Okay. Now, the fifth chapter, the final days of Noble Drew Ali, analyzes the general laws created by Ali during the first annual convention to address the disunity within the ranks of Moorish science. The group was clearly in trouble, and the year following the convention proved to be tremendous and witnessed the murder of one of its leading members, several diverse legal battles, and eventually the death of its prophet, Noble Drew Ali. The movement suffered tremendously after Noble Drew Ali's death and became fragmented due to the competition for recognition among three main factions. The fragmentation continued to the present, however, in the conclusion, some of the reasons for the success of the movement are as assessed, and the MSCA influence on subsequent Islamic movements among Moorish Americans is highlighted, pointing to the historical significance of Noble Drew Ali to the 20th century Moorish American history. So, in the beginning of the origin stories of Noble Drew Ali, during the last quarter of the 19th century, the United States of America, which we know as the U.S. corporation, was in the midst of one of the most significant changes in its history. The closing of the Civil War in 1865 ushered in a period of reconstruction in U.S., right? We went from the United States of America to the U.S. Southern states as federal troops occupied the South to oversee the transition from a slave society to a free labor society. Despite the chaos, daily life continued on January 8th, 1886. A future prophet, Noble Drew Ali, was born into this volatile and heightened racial state. Throughout the course of his lifetime, he would learn, grow, and change into a leader among his people, eventually becoming recognized as the first leader in a long tradition of Moors in America, Islam, and the so-called U.S. While his story is one of significant to the fabric of American life, there is no much documentation about his early years according to Ali's followers. He was born in Sampson, North Carolina. Historians such as Michael A. Gomez, the hater again, right, contended that there is no such place in North Carolina and searches for Timothy Drew, but his name is Thomas Drew. Excuse my language, you punk. Thomas Drew. It's Noble Drew Ali. Stop trying to make my prophet back into that scrawl title. It is Prophet Noble Drew Ali. That's what he changed. That's what he changed it to. Okay, absolutely. All right. Hold up, Morris. Let me get myself together. All right. I gotta get myself back together. All right. And it was Noble Drew Ali. Okay. So, in a census records revealing nothing, this ambiguity has been the subject of speculation as both followers of the prophet and scholars alike have sketched for the roots of Drew's ancestry. Who was Noble Drew Ali? The historiography of Drew's life before 1925 comes mainly from oral tradition. What has been reported about these early years gives us insights not only about who Drew Ali was before becoming a professor and prophet, but it also informs us about early 20th century American life and culture. And it's worth investigating for an understanding of the complicated social reality of this period in U.S. history. For example, according to the Islamic scholar Peter Lamborn Wilson, um, Thomas Drew was born, Noble Drew Ali was born Thomas Drew, most probably January 8th, 1886 in North Carolina, child of so-called ex-slaves, which is a lie. Okay, among because he was born of Moors. That before Europeans took over and got the apparatus and all this, you see what I'm saying? They want to make sure that they want to try to make him into the slave when Moors were never were slaves. That's not in our bloodline. We did the labor, but we wasn't slaves. We're not slaves. We're not Slavics. Period. Now, most probably January 8th, 1886, North Carolina, child, right, among the Cherokee Indians, right, which we know they were Moors, okay, who are said to have adopted him so that later in life he always wore a feather in his fez, or so they say, for a great deal of this account is pure oral history, right? It can be lies, it's hearsay, okay? Now, Wilson goes on to discuss the historical possibility recounted along the way. Some include the idea of Thomas Drew being orphaned, Noble Drew being orphaned by his mother, deaf, and adopted by an evil aunt. Others include a narrative of his father and the family's relocation to Newark in the 1880s and early induction to Islam by a traveling master Adab, a term used for Chinese traveling teachers across all, which is a Moors, anyway, Asiatics, right? They always try to bring this stuff up. But anyway, across all the narratives, there is a theme of movement and travel, and it is exposed to secret knowledge. The variations of the theme span across various cultural frontiers, but all offer some type of explanation for importance of Noble Drew Ali, its early experience, and its his preparation as prophet and leader, a man who later in life would be regarded as a prophet and understood to have miraculous healing abilities, was early distinguished as a special child with many spiritual gifts after being put through fire and coming out unharmed, much like the biblical story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Ali ran away from his aunt and joined the gypsies. He is said to have been employed as a merchant seaman, a magician in the traveling circus, right? A railway expressman, and somehow ultimately ended up in Egypt, where he received the clandestine knowledge of Sultan Abdul al Saud and received the title Ali. During his trip to Egypt, Ali's prophecy was revealed to him, and upon his return to the United States, he began to spread the sacred lessons he learned while away. By 1913, Noble Drew Ali had resurfaced in Newark, New Jersey, and is said to have created the first iteration of Moorish science. The Canaanite temple, it seemed that much of the uncertainty around Noble Drew Ali's personal origins transferred to his movement as well. There are still limited records on this earlier movement, and for the most part, it seems that scholars accepted the narratives despite any primary source verification. According to the story, within a year after establishing the Canaanite temple, Noble Drew Ali encountered several changes to his leadership from Abdul Wali Farad, Muhammad Ali, and by 1916, the temple had been racked by factionalism. This mysterious character from the East is rumored to have been none other than Wali D. Fard, founder of the Nation of Islam, which, see, we go back to Wali D. Ford L. You understand? Uh-huh. So those who reclaim loyal to Noble Drew Ali reconstituted themselves in Newark as the holy Moabite temple of the world. By 1925, Noble Drew Ali had resurfaced in Chicago and laid claim to a new movement, the Moorish Science Temple. This glaring gap in the historical record has made it difficult to ascertain the actual activities of these groups because they all hid the information because they didn't want nobody to find out. That's see Morris, we gotta understand that a lot of this stuff would expose them, okay, and they gotta go hide it. So if we are to take seriously the impact of Noble Drew Ali's early years may have had on shaping his prophethood, then the narrative must be verified. And attempted to tell the story of the movement, most scholarly accounts focus on the 1920s because that's where it's at its most purest form in the 1920s. At its most purest form in the 1920s because that's when Moors had real nationality, not no 501c contemporary corporate quasi nationality, which is a U.S. corporation, 14th Amendment, slave, chattel, right? Now, and attempted to tell the story of the movement, most scholarly accounts focus on the 1920s and end shortly after Noble Drew Ali's death in 1929. This is particularly interesting since most accounts of the temple site is founded in 1913 as the Canaanite Temple. Susan Nance emphasizes that 75 years after it emerged in Chicago, the origin of Moorish science is still a long-standing puzzle of American religious history. Scholarly accounts of the Moorish science temple make this problem clear. For example, in More Gods of the Metropolis, anthropologist Arthur Huff Fawcett opens his chapter on Moorish Science Temple by recounting its origins. This cult was founded about 1913 by Thomas Drew, Noble Drew Ali, who came from North Carolina, where he was born in 1886. Michael A. Gomez acknowledged that accounts difficult to verify maintained that in either 1912 or 1913, at the age of 27, Noble Drew Ali established the Canaanite Temple in Newark, New Jersey, preaching his doctrine in basements, empty lots, and street corners with the help of a shadowy Dr. Suleiman. Goldman claims that Newark was the first in a series of worship centers that would collectively come to be known as Moorish science. More recently, religious scholars Edward E. Curtis, in his chapter debating the origins of Moorish science temple (MST), argues that a vexing theoretical problems first encountered by Fawcett continue to characterize the analysis of the MST. The problem emerged in attempting to answer questions about the origins of the group. The ambiguity in historical detail seems to be an underlying theme in the record of the temple. The issue of locating the beginning of the movement is significant and, in fact, only signals to the beginning of the historical questions that needed to be addressed. In an effort to explain the secrecy behind Noble Drew Ali's past, brother A. Wise Bay, a member of Moorish Science Temple of America (MSTA), said the prophet told him, "I didn't tell anyone where I was born or who my parents were because I didn't want people to make a shrine out of the place or make over my parents like was done with Joseph and Mary." According to this testimony, Noble Drew Ali intentionally withheld the details of the past from his followers and future historians alike. The suggestion that he sought to protect his parents and obscure his place of birth is highly questionable. No, it's not. That's honorable because he didn't want them to make a shrine. That's all these people do is make shrines out of every damn thing. You know what I mean? Please. North Carolina is the late 19th century was a place of racial and cultural diversity. Racial feudality is found especially in certain sections of the state. The mixing of Native Americans. See, this is what they want to say, the mixing. No, it was Moors first, and Moors had sex with everybody that was here, with the slaves and everything. We had harems, okay? And then through that mixing, okay, okay, you have mixing of Moors, right? And then you have the Indians, and then you have some mixtures with you know um European, modern Europeans, and that was it. Okay, that's it. Now, now, resulted in the multiple possibilities that could have informed Noble Drew Ali's identity. No, it hasn't. More Noble Drew Ali came back as a Moor. That was his identity. Moorish American, a Moor. That was his identity, his national identity that was already encased in stone. That's why he's the prophet. Now, the part of Drew's personal history that notes ties to Cherokee ancestry makes the mixed racial history of North Carolina that much more interesting and important to the development of the Moorish Science Temple, whether or not Drew Ali was of Cherokee ancestry, which like we said before, he was Moor. And we had Europe, Europeans enslaved, and the mixed ones was Indians. You feel what I'm saying? But it was still Moors that was ruling and still running around here. Okay, and then they turned around and called Moors Indians. Then from Indians to Negroes. Please. Now, as important as the fact that this idea has remained a constant thread in the stories of his life before 1913, that's a lot. Because before the prophet, everybody was known as a Negro. Nobody wasn't calling themselves Moors. Okay, so just his work alone and what he did alone changed the diaspora. Now, Noble Drew Ali development of Moorish identity was a social and economic construct that integrated the traditions stimulated from the syncretic traditions of Moorish Americans, religion, and the early forms of Islam in the United States of America. historian Alan Austin and others made it clear that so-called enslaved Africans brought Islam to the United States, which we never left America, which was a Morocco. So we never left it. This how these damn dirty scholars that be writing these dirty ass wizardry spells and witch spells on the people. No, that's wrong. Now, thus was a part of Moorish American religious practices from the antebellum. Now, the antebellum is in the south, and that's where the Moorish stronghold was. That was the Barbary Moors in the antebellum south. We ruled that with impurity. That's where you have what? The Confederacy from. The red flag, okay? With the stars, the Milky Way, right? So people got to understand that these people change history through reconstruction, right? Now, while we may strive to uncover the intimate spiritual strivings of early adherents to Moorish science, as well as the motivations and influences on Noble Drew Ali in shaping the tradition, it is important to remember that we are able to capture only the imprint of the experiences always imperfectly perceived. Now, there we got another damn sellout. W.E.B. Du Bois, a damn boule sellout that was going against Garvey. That's why all these people are in line. W.D. Du Bois is down with Prince Hall Masons and all these clandestine, dirty, traded, dirty Moors with they smelly corporate, modern European corporates. All dirty. Okay? In his foundation essay of our spiritual strivings in the souls of so-called black folk, 1903 declared that the spiritual world in which 10,000 Americans live and strive is rendered elusive, a stretch and vague, uncertain outline in space continually transformed by the impact of history rather than some fixed, inert phenomenon to be grasped or observed. As we attempt to trace and rediscover the history of Noble Drew Ali and the Moorish Science Temple, we should remember that Ali himself seemed to have been on a personal spiritual journey which may never be fully grasped. That's what they don't want. They don't want Moors to fully grasp what the prophet brought. I grasping what the prophet brought, and there's going to be Moors behind me that's going to grasp what the prophet got. That's what they're trying to stop. Okay, because if every Moor grasps what the prophet got, what we got going on now would not be going on. Okay, traces of Islam on the American continent date back to the colonial era. According to Gomez, the hater, the Muslim presence in the American South antedates the arrival of the English. The Muslim influence on the social, political, and religious traditions of the Moorish American community are just beginning to be understood and documented. Historian Richard Brent Turner notes the significance of Muslim presence among Moorish Americans. Enslaved Muslims continue to practice Islam in their family networks and might have converted other slaves, right? Their religion significantly influenced Moorish American identity, culture, religion, ethnicity, and class stratification. In pre 20th century Moor America, one of the earliest examples we have is the narrative of Omar Ibn, right? Said Omar's story is one of many that illustrates the presence and power of Islamic belief in the early nation. Written in 1836, said manuscripts was publicized and displayed in 1863. This early narrative and personal autobiography, written in Arabic, detailed the conversation of and more Muslim to Christianity. More importantly, it documents the Moorish Muslim presence in the United States prior to Noble Drew Ali. See there? So so this was in the 1800s. Now, Moorish Science Temple. Moreover, the narrative places him in North Carolina, said was enslaved in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and in 1826 he met a Presbyterian pastor and professor who on 8th January 1883 published an article about said in New York Observer titled Midra, a native Moor. This early acknowledgement of Islam among Moors who had been enslaved in the United States of America demonstrated the possibility of the presence of Islamic worship during slavery, and it spread among Moorish Americans because they killed all the ancestors who knew the treaties. They rounded them all up. That's what all the wars was all about, getting rid of and subjugating those who knew the truth. Now, personal biography and early organizing activities before he reached Chicago are unknown. We do know that he directed his followers to Islam as a way to understanding themselves. There are early examples of influential enslaved Muslims who received special treatment because of their intellect and command of written and spoken Arabic. These stories of Moors escaping slavery through claiming an Islamic or Moroccan identity contribute to the cultural memory of Moorish Americans, and Drew Ali may have been exposed to the ideas about Islam and pan Moorish Americanism as a child. The evidence of an Islamic presence in antebellum America is important, and it laid the foundation for the proliferation of Moorish American Islam after the era of so-called slavery. Right? Richard Brent Turner suggested that renaming was an act of European psychology. They gave him a name, then defined it as something inferior to theirs. Naming practices have been a way to claim a cultural identity, and in the case of those within the African diaspora, they have been used to reclaim Moorish heritage while negating the names associated with slave masters. The use of El or Bey in Moorish adherents names signify their break with their American roots and recognition of another nationality or creed. This naming has been a significant marker of Moorish influence in America, right, and culture. And this surname is commonly found among some of the well respected professionals. The Great Migration of and the movement of North, right? Right? So what they're telling you is that it's history on Moorish Americans before the prophet came, but we forgot who we were. So Allah sent us a prophet to remind us who we were. Now, the Great Migration and Movement North. By 1863, Abraham Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation, and in 1865, the 13th Amendment made slavery illegal in the United States of America. As the Civil War came to an end, freedom became a reality for Moorish Americans, and many advances were made during the Reconstruction era of 1867, 1877. The overthrow of Reconstruction era led to the first wave of migration of Moorish Americans out of the rural South to the urban centers, the Northwest, and the 1879 Exodus, because Moors was already in a Moorish states. So they broke up everything Moors had going on, and they reiterated with the world fairs. Because from 1865 to 1776, 1776 to 1865, God got to get it now. Get it now. Now, in many ways, the history of Moorish Americans is one of migration as people move from spaces of captivity to places that promise liberty. Their faith and freedom was renewed. Although these new homes often improved conditions, they sometimes came with a new set of problems, including poverty, hunger, and juvenile delinquency. Moorish Americans, migrants, often found themselves in an unfriendly world, one hampered by modern European racism, because the modern European had got into power now, and they were still mad at the Moors. Okay, that was the whole thing. It wasn't no damn slavery. They didn't come from no Africa, because this is Africa. Okay, all right. So everything has been, you know, put forth to indoctrinate the people that we have came from Africa over there, when Africa we standing in. Now, migrants often found themselves in an unfriendly world. So we have to understand the modern European racism, bigotry, and legal restrictions imposed by Jim Crow. Moorish American migrations contribute to the growth of urban centers, the changing of the religious expressions and practices, and the the restoring of American society. Their influxes into cities across the United States of America changed not only the demographics, but the culture of the cities they inhabited. Sociologists St. Clair Drake and Horace Claydon observed that prior to 1915, right? Now, we got there was little to encourage plantation laborers to risk life in the city streets. Now there were jobs to attract them, right? To attract them. For the first time, Southern Moors were actually being invited after the outbreak of war in Europe, even urged to come to Chicago. So they was being invited to Europe, Chicago, New York, all over because Moors ran the antebellum South. So now the Reconstruction period coming in. Now Moors is migrating from here up into the North more because it was Moors up north more. But now they got jobs now. Now we can't run the South no more with slaves no more. So now it's a Reconstruction period. Everything is new now. And that's when we going through our turmoil through the Jim Crow era and all that when the Klan was formed and they so-called hanging Negroes and all that. That's when all that bull crap started. But before that, there was none of that junk going on. Now, droves of 50,000 of them between 1910 and 1920, a flood of relatives in France followed in their wake. Drake and Clayton noted that New Jersey did not have the renown of Chicago or of New York City's Harlem, but many migrants preferred its slower pace and smaller cities between 1900 and 1930. More migration to New Jersey was the major factor in tripling the race population from 69,844 to 208,828,000. The population explosion in urban areas created great changes that allowed diverse ethnic and religious communities to develop and flourish. Chicago and Newark became critical sites for Noble Drew Ali, unique religious formation of Moorish science. Okay? During the World War I, years immigration from Europe slowed, leaving northern factory owners in need of laborers, and southern, right, modern Europeans and Moors began moving to north in unprecedented numbers. Between 1914 and 1920, Noble Drew Ali was among those who migrated to the north. The development of the Moorish Science Temple of America reflected the impact that this period had on Ali's thinking and understanding of social and cultural reality. His solution to the problem facing Moorish Americans in the United States of America and abroad was to reclaim their lost identity, to redeem man from his sinful and fallen stage of humanity back to the highest plane of life with his Father God Allah. Historian Milton Cernit has argued that Newark became a critical arena in which the struggle of Moorish Americans to find the promised lands took place. This notion of the promised land and the research for poetic religious fulfillment had permeated Moorish America's consciousness since the era of so-called slavery. This theme of the promised land, right? God's promise to Abraham in the Bible captivated Moorish Americans who used the story to interpret their own future and destiny as God's chosen people. New Canaan was the metaphorical designation of Moorish Americans used to make sense of the many generations that had suffered through so-called slavery, which we know is moving and Jim Crowism, and eventually would be given a place for their descendants to remain and flourish. This idea was often utilized to advertise for Moorish Americans' migration out of the South and to cities in the North, such as Chicago, New York, Detroit, and Newark. Once in these new urban cities and centers of North and West, according to Hans, a Bear, and Merrill Singer, a Moorish American, religion underwent a rapid process of um, diversification in the early decades of the 20th century, particularly with the appearance of a wide array of new holiness, Pentecostal, spiritual, Islamic, and Judaic sects. To a large extent, the baseline for this um, diversification was the Moorish rural church. The creation of the Moorish Science Temple of America can be understood as part of this larger trend of religious diversification that accompanied the Great Migration. Political scientist Ira Canton-Nielsen, in his book Black Men, right, so-called black men and so-called white cities, explained that some American Moors reacted to the close political possibilities of the Southern colonial racial system by seeking to establish new and they hope more valuable linkages with the national political system. Now, Noble Drew Ali, a representative of this larger trend of migration, experimented with the ideas he was exposed to in an attempt to redefine Moorish American nationality, religion, and social status within the U.S. cultural political landscape, which is the United States of America. His movement out of the South and into the North urban centers resulted in the creation of the Moorish Science Temple and reflects larger themes in American history, such as individual exploration, re-innovation, and unending quest for freedom and justice. As a result of the Great Migration, many alternative religious formations, right, appeared in Moorish American communities, manifesting unique approaches to Christian tenets, but staying within that dominant theological system. Drew Ali's Moorish science was one of the first to openly reclaim Islam, arguing that it and not Christianity was the true faith of Moorish American descendant people in the Americas and around the world. He argued that the evils of slavery, which had robbed Moorish American people of their history, were also responsible for the introduction of Christianity in the community. By going back to Islam and centering that connection of Morocco and North Africa, which is north of Mexico, which is North America, the followers would come to know their true selves and would be able to reclaim their nationality, an important political move for its followers, given their conditions in the early 20th century. While it may seem like a strange choice and perhaps even somewhat arbitrary, the transition to a faith based in Islam rather than Christianity was not that difficult for Ali adherents. Islam derives its origins from the um, Arab Aramic Judo Christian tradition. Moreover, members of the Moorish science had a collective memory of the use of Christianity to buttress slave owners' claims to legitimacy, and thus there was enough familiarity while at the same time distance to accept Moorish science. But to understand Moorish science successfully as entirely caused by this anti or pro Christian connection is to ignore the complexity and sophistication that underlay the foundation of Moorish science. See there? So it is commonly acknowledged that the interwar, right, or the interwar years were a time of religious diversification in the United States of America. Historian Wilson Jeremiah Moses argued that the fact that the Masonic religiously among the Moor people of the United States of America had expressed itself in the Jewish and Islamic as well as in Christian forms indicates underlying strains of similarity between Pan-Africanism and Islam and Zionism. The uses of Islam and Christianity and Moorish science demonstrate the complicated relationship these faiths had with one another. So the prophet was true. In fact, indeed, he merged everything together with the real concepts and the real truths that Moors already propagated anciently. Now, Islam had a long, somewhat hidden role in the history, right, of Moorish American political, religious, and social organizations during the height of modern European supremacist activities, evidenced by the unending violence of modern European lynch mobs and racial separation due to Jim Crow legislation. Islam offered Moorish Americans an opportunity to know themselves, although Ali was not the first to bring Islam importance to the attention to Moorish Americans. His combination of religion, history, and culture led to the development of a lasting religious movement, which became an indispensable element in the history of Islam in America. On the significance of Islam in Moorish science, historian Susan Nance has argued that we must take Ali's use of the word Islam and other things Islamic as symbols which he used not to direct his believers to scriptural Islam or to the beliefs and practices of Muslims in the United States or elsewhere, but rather as a sign of authenticity and secret wisdom of Moorish Americans had come to recognize in other contexts already. This was an important aspect of Moorish science appeal among Moorish Americans who joined the movement, but it does not include the reasons participants themselves gave for joining the movement. Anthropologist Arthur Huff Fawcett was one of the first to document followers' conversion experiences according to his research. Followers stated that they could not reconcile the Christian teachings and practice or had become mentally distressed by the paradoxes of American Christian practice or loathed the hypocrisy of the Christians. So they joined the Muslims. So while Nance may be on something in her description of the power symbolism had in Ali's teachings, it was not until the embrace of Islamic identity that had his movement was able to crystallize. So new thought in Rosicrucianism, right? Which is all our stuff. All they doing is mixing and scratching. That's 360 degrees. Because that's what Moors are. We 360 degrees, 720 all day. New Thought and Rosicrucianists were also fundamental to the development of Ali's theology and cannot be dismissed in their influence on some of the sects. Fundamental tenet. Gomez noted that Noble Drew Ali not appropriated the beliefs of either Christian Science or any other New Thought movement willy-nilly, nor did he borrow indiscriminately from Rosicrucian literature. His selections from these sources were carefully chosen to support his own unique articulation of faith and political being. Scholars and adherents alike have recognized that Ali borrowed from two texts in the creation of the Bible of Moorish science, Circle 7 Quran. Ali were very likely borrowed from an early 20th century text by Levi Dowling, right? But that's bullcrap because, like I said before, this is all Moorish science, and Levi Dawi borrowed from the Moors. So all the prophet did was take back that he borrowed from the Moors and bring it back to the Moors' home. That's all he did. No damn plagiarism. Because if that was the case, all modern Europeans and all modern nations has been plagiarism, has been plagiarizing. Okay, now, and an ancient Chinese text translated in the late 18th century in England unto the I grant crafting of the text, as Goldman's mentioned, was deliberate and should be studied closely as means of communicating some key messages of more science, because we already know he's a hater, right? So Goldman's pointing out more than any specific doctrine, what Noble Drew Ali learned from these movements was the notion that the individual was not a prisoner to here or his circumstances, but that through a disciplined reordering of the understanding, change was possible given the strong influence of alternative spiritualist movements at the time. Gomez observed that it is all the more remarkable that Noble Drew Ali embraced Islamism, for he had every incentive to simply follow in non-Islamic paths already laid. While Gomez's observation is right about these alternatives, his conclusion that once again it may point to a residual pre-Rosicrucian extension of belief hailing back to Muslims born in Africa, most be considered in the light of Islam, influence on both Garveyism and Moorish American Masonic groups such as the Shriners, to be discussed in chapters 2 and 3. Yet it also must be pointed out that the roots of Islam and Garveyism should also be considered, especially the scholarly works of Edward Wilmot Biden, right? With whom Garvey had maintained an enduring interest. Biden's legacy among Moorish Americans, descendant peoples, has already been examined. His pioneering work in Christianity, Islam, and the Moor race offered a justification for 20th century all Moorish religious movements. Richard Turner believed that it is impossible to understand fully the transition between the old Islam of the original Moorish American Muslim, right? So-called slave, and the new Moorish American Islam of the early 20th century without giving some attention to 19th century Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism formed the ideological bridge between these two phases of Islam in the United States. The rich ideological and intellectual traditions that were planted and propagated through the work of Biden, Garvey, and Ali laid a firm foundation for the Pan-African thought and rhetoric in the early 20th century, although Ali and his movement are sometimes overlooked in determining their impact on the tradition of Islam amongst Moorish Americans. Noble Drew Ali maintained of the tradition of Islamic and Pan-Africanism. Solidarity makes the Moorish sign significant in the history of Islam among Moorish Americans and critical to our understanding of 20th century movements of Moorish liberation, the emergence of a proto-Moorish science. While most accounts of Noble Drew Ali actively placed him in Newark, New Jersey in 1913 and recounted his establishment of the Canaanite temple, they do not provide further details. According to those, some narrative, Noble Drew Ali encountered the mysterious Dr. Hamid Suleiman, an Egyptian adept who was fluent in Egyptian languages. It is with the arrival of this little known personage that the Canaanite temple was abandoned, but this served as background experience in the creation and development of Moorish science. There are many theories about what Drew Ali was doing during the 12-year gap in the historical record between the development of the Canaanite temple in 1930 and the formation of the Moorish Science Temple in 1925. The oral and printed accounts tell of the challenge to Drew Ali's leadership in the Canaanite temple. Michael Gomez, the hater, concluded the confrontation with the teacher from the East may have had some lingering effects on Noble Drew Ali's early followers. For by 1916, factionism had divided them. So everything that was factionalism divided them because these people, Suleiman, them wanted to try to put a fatwa on the prophet, okay, because the prophet exposed all the secrets and he didn't like that. So they wanted to try to stop Drew Ali. No, you can't stop what the prophet and what divine already came. Okay. Now, those who remain loyal to Noble Drew Ali reconstituted, right, themselves in Newark as the holy Moabite temple of the world, indicating that Noble Drew Ali chose to maintain his distance from orthodoxy while working out his own physical um, philosophical principles. If it was with ease that Ali followers reconstructed themselves as the holy Moabite temple of the world, we know very little about this organization or even Drew's whereabouts over the next 12 years. Because this is from Michael Gomez. They knew where he was at. He established all these temples, and then he got rid of the temple that he no longer needed no more. And then he came out of those temples with the Moorish Science Temple of America. Okay. Now, Professor Drew, according to the oral testimonies of the members of Moorish Science, Noble Drew Ali first began his teaching as Professor Drew, Egyptian adept student, and continued them through his organization activities in the Canaanite temple. Although there is no date or citation available for the advertisement of Professor Drew, a World War I draft registration card from 12 September 1918 and 1920 United States Census placed a Thomas Drew at this time, same address, while the first name Thomas conflicts with previous accounts of Drew Ali as so-called Timothy Drew, which is a lie. See, this is where they mix and scratch, Morris. The information from the draft card and census records suggest otherwise. The draft card from, because that's what we already have in our lessons. We debunked that because the prophet said that you don't supposed to be going to war for foreigners. You're not supposed to fight in foreign wars. It's in our lesson. So we're going to debunk Timothy Drew. Timothy Drew is a lie. Okay. Now, the same day follows the historian cite as his birthday, and also cites him as a so-called Negro. But we know he's a Moor. This is the trick. This is where they come. This Moor put down Moor science, showed Moors what their nationality is, and then y'all gonna go around and say this Moor is a Negro. That's slander and that's treason, right? Man of medium height and build with black hair. Ultimately, Drew was disqualified for service in the war because the muscles on his forearm were badly burned. This physical feature of Drew Ali also parallels the MSTA follow stories of Drew's childhood, where he was cast into a fire by his aunt. The draft registration card also places Drew as a laborer for the submarine boat. See, we know all this is lies. Okay, Drew Ali wouldn't have did that. He came to liberate our mindset. So why would he go join something when he knows he telling other Moors not to? Okay. Now, corporation in the port of New Jersey as a laborer in the port, Drew would have come into contact with workers from different countries as the corporation at its peak employed 25,000 people. The census record from January 1920 confers Thomas Drew residence at 181 Warren Street, New Jersey. The census lists Drew as a preacher on public streets, indicating that between September 1918 and January 1920, Drew had begun formulating some version of his religious movement. It is unclear what specific religious affiliations Drew had at this time, since the only early record that has survived is the advertisement for Professor Drew, Egyptian ADAP student. Despite oral testimony that connects Drew to the Canaanite temple, there is no further evidence that tangibly connects his early religious efforts to the Canaanite temple. There is evidence on the advertisement for Professor Drew that he was already contributing and combining Islam with Christianity, as he states on the card, "I am a Muslim." What the prophet say? I am a Muslim, not no Muslim. And also indicates that he has the divine ability to interpret the Bible while also offering information about the lost years of the life of Jesus, which is Yahshua. Research on Abdul Hamid Suleiman, an Egyptian Muslim, reveals his organized activities associated with the Canaanite temple and its connection to Moorish American Freemasonry. This information about Suleiman's activities in the Canaanite temple suggests that Noble Drew Ali and his creation of Moorish science may have been influenced by the work of Suleiman. No, what it was Suleiman was influenced by the work of the prophet, and he came around snooping, and that's how these Masons was all up in the prophet's lessons, and that's how they cooled it. They sent all these clandestine ass agents around because Suleiman tried to put a fatah on the prophet. Now, the so and his creation of more science may have been right influenced by 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 Noble Drew Ali that attracted Suleiman. The religious scholar Patrick D. Bowman identified an article, the Moor Freemason Incorporate, right, in the New Brunswick Times on the 4th of February 1910, which reported the incorporation of Mecca Medina Temple of ancient free and operative Masons. In August 1922, Suleiman amended the Moorish American Masonic Convention, where he presented himself to Caesar R. Blake Jr., the leader of the ancient Egyptian Arabic order of nobles of the Mystic Shrine, also referred to as the Moor Shriners, and insisted that the Shriners come under protection of the Mecca Medina Temple, what he referred to as the true shrine. These insights about Suleiman and his connection to the earliest forms of Masonic Islamic organization further complicated the history of Noble Drew Ali and the creation of the Canaanite Temple in 1913. Both Mecca, Medina, and the Canaanite Temple may have been, as Bowen suggests, one of the many Moorish American Masonic factions that had been springing up since 1894, inspired the by the rhetoric of the Moor Shriner movement. Drew Ali may have been involved in the formation of the Canaanite temple, but it seems that the previously documented timeline of 1913 is highly unlikely because they just like they changed up all the history. They took everything out of it, they hid it, and they put it over here so you couldn't find it. You know what I mean? That's how they keep everything, and then they bigging up the the reincarnated prophet and Kirkman Bay and all these dirty Moors they giving honors to, right? Please, man. Now, but it seems that previously documented timeline of 1913 is highly unlikely. Moreover, it was not until 1920 that Drew formally associated itself as a preacher as documented in the 1920 census. Although it is not impossible that Drew had been involved in shaping the Canaanite temple, his presence has not been documented in any sources related to the organization. Right? So why they always trying to put our prophet into these certain lessons, and they want to try to say that our prophet was this and he was that. Yeah, our culture is Masons. See, y'all don't understand what Moors are. Moors culture is Masonry. We are the founders of that. That's why it's more science. And then we gave it to our children so we can make them upright so they could be able to run a government because they was ignorant. They didn't know how to bathe themselves, okay? All these modern Europeans need to be kissing the Moors' feet instead of running around here trying to debate Moors because you cannot stop what Allah already has put forth, okay? You cannot stop that. So, in that regard, Moors, I'm going to leave us in that contemporament because now the next time we're going to come back, you know what I mean? Because I want to make sure the next time we coming back on the next episode is going to be the converts sought by the Mohammedans, okay? And that's going to be the next story. But I want Morris to understand that the people that presenting this stuff to you, they are colonizers and they don't like the truth. The truth is art and it will set you free. So study Moors and do some research, okay? And don't let these dirty, clandestine, smelly corporate, modern Europeans and Asiatics that's in clandestine positions tell you anything, okay? Peace, love, and light, and honor to our prophet, Noble Drew Ali, and Islam, Moors. Islam. And peace.